Welcome to Revelation TV's The Interview. And I'm Doug Harris, and I was going to say victim, but I don't think so. Well, he might find out afterwards. But my guest today, you will recognise, maybe not by name. The name is Graham Cole. Graham, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here, Doug.
I've thoroughly enjoyed the last half hour talking with you. But of course, everybody's going to look at you and they're going to say, I know that bloke. I know. His name's not Graham. It must be PC Tony Stamp.
Indeed. Or they think I'm a long-lost cousin or an uncle. It's the face. They've lived with the face for so long.
Yeah. 25 years in the bill.
Amazing.
Yeah. You enjoyed it, didn't you?
I had an absolute ball.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it far too much. It was wrong. I had such a good time there.
We're going to get on and talking about that, and of course your book where you actually appear in uniform on the book. We'll come on and talk about that in a while. But I want to begin at the beginning, if we can. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing, your early life, etc., what it was like.
One of three children, two elder sisters, and I'm born in Willesden in North London, at home, as you were, in 1952. Apparently, we've just gone through a lot of snow, and apparently there was more snow in London that year that the midwife couldn't get through on a bike. So Dad did all the delivering. Thank goodness he had two to practice on before. My dad was a clerk of works, and when I was 5, he moved us down to Harlow in Essex, which was for me a fantastic move. Devout, stout Methodists. Dad was an organist, church organist, so when we went down to Harlow, we had a 2.5-mile walk to church and a 2.5-mile walk back, sometimes 3 times if they were doing christenings, because Dad was, on the organ, so we had no choice to go down there. And for me, Harlow at the time, for those that live there, won't understand what I'm about. It was just fields with a few houses. And Dad went down to work with Costa Electronics and moved the family out of North London, out of Willesden, and of course we were living at the time, like many did, in a house that was split into 2 flats with an Irish family above us and living with Gran. So it was a huge move on the part of Dad to go to this strange place. He had, all the new towns were being built at the time, Welwyn Garden City and other places. So he had a choice of new towns to go to, and he chose Harlow because it was easy straight up the A10 to get back to Willesden, which we did continually. A huge family, Mum's family and Dad's family, huge family. And ironic, when I started on the bill, we were filming at Shepherd's Bush, so I was nipping into aunts and uncles for tea while we were filming on the streets. But, and again, I think, like most, I rebelled against the fact of having to go to church. So at about 9 or 10, I went into the signal box because Harlow Town Station was just coming to the end of steam. I mean, it really was an idyllic place for a kid to grow up. And we coerced the little signalman, so I was in the box as the last of the steam trains hurtled through. And I remember it, I can smell it even now. It was fantastic, idyllic childhood. Worked on the farms when I was a teenager. Did all sorts of jobs when I was a teenager, I have to say. Never was I at home. I've always been out and about, and so again the bill was perfect for me. Working on the streets, and 98% of my time was on the streets of London. Never went anywhere near the studios. It was absolutely great life. And the town started to be built up, so we started to have neighbours and friends and all that sort of thing. Brand new, everything was new, brand new schools, and I can remember these lads building a church just above. We have many hills in Harlow, and they're just building on top of this hill where there were only a parade of shops and there was nothing else. If you wanted to go to a supermarket, then it was a drive. You had to go into Tottenham or somewhere like that. I mean, it really was nothing but fields and forests. But these lads, there was something about these men, and they invited us as the Ashleyfield gang, because that was where I was brought up, in Ashleyfield. They invited us to come and join them, mix cement and mess around with them. And it was really the first time that I saw practical Christianity, i.e. Christians just come and join us and make a mess. And
what age were you then?
I would have been 10. Right. 10, just going on to senior school.
It's interesting, it affected you even at that age. I mean, was it such a contrast to sort of you growing up having to go to church, and now you had this opportunity with practical Christianity?
I think it was the fact of always being around ritual. and around, the paraphernalia of the clothing and everything that went with that. And of course, Dad being quite strict in the sense that he knew what he had to do, and it was the old pump organs as well. I mean, he was really working there. But it was that the whole family were absolutely centred in the Methodist Church, and all my cousins were all in the boys' brigade and all that sort of stuff. So I've always been quite rebellious, and it's never worked in my favour. If everyone in the street had a skateboard, then I'd have a scooter. I really hated conformity. And so these lads, or the men that were building this church, was fascinating to me because they weren't builders, and that they literally did have out sometimes, books on how to build the wall because it's now going into a window and that sort of stuff. But they brought us into that. And it was a small little church that the Turner family, it was his inspiration to have a church in this new part of Harlow that's being built up. There was Old Harlow, and people may know about that very historic part of Essex. But it was just their enthusiasm that I loved, and the fact that they would invite you in. And many, many, many years later, I went back to do an alpha for them. And I was walking on a little wall that I helped build on the outside. Well, in my terms, I helped build. I'm sure I didn't. But I was going past there, and these 5 lads said, "Oh, yeah, Tony," as in your introduction, "Hey, Tony, off the bill, what are you doing?" Well, I used to live here, and this was my church. I'm going in to talk about my life. And they said, "Can we come?" Yep, great, yeah, come on in. Probably 12, 13 years of age. And what surprised me, and does continually as I go around and do the alpha things, was they were looked on with utter suspicion as they walked in, and everyone looked as though they're going to nick the silver. And, but to me, that's alpha. That's what alpha's absolutely grounded in. And that's why you have a face to bring in,
And because that's what Jesus would have done, wouldn't he? I mean, the people, he'd have said, "Yeah, I'm for you. I've come for you guys. That's really what I'm here for."
I've always felt that my use as a Christian has been a pair of ears, in that I'm ready to listen. And today, I was walking down the high street where I live near Bromley, and a guy stopped me and wanted to talk about the demise of the bill. And he said, "And you go to this church, don't you?" "Yeah, I do. I've never been here." I said, "Well, come." So, you're right. You don't know where those tiny little moments lead you. And I've always thought that for me, particularly being on a show like The Bill, I used to probably get 40, 50 letters a week to Tony Stamp. And 5 or 6 of those will be from kids in turmoil. I joined with Esther Ranson in Childline. I've been there 24 years or something now. As a patron of that, I go out and collect the checks and do all the stuff with all the businessmen to keep the organisation going. I do go on the phones occasionally, but not very often, because a famous voice doesn't necessarily help the situation that those kids are in at the time. But again, for me, it's something that's practical. And these kids would write to me, and bless her, Claire Rayner was fabulous to me, because I used to, the really tough letters, I would sort of send off. And as a footnote of that, I just had a Facebook call up from a girl who's now 26, and she said, "I wrote to you when I was 8 because my rabbit had died. And you sent back a lovely letter and a photograph." And it's absolutely true. I know we were talking about it earlier. It's absolutely true. I had this vision of where the rabbit was. My photograph now is in the hutch in replacement.
She strokes it every morning.
But it's amazing, isn't it? 26, just a letter.
But it's taking the time with people, isn't it? I mean, that's what you're saying. You're a listener. But it's even as, somebody that is busy and is famous in that sense, but it's taking the time with the ordinary person. It really means something.
Well, you have hours, as you well know, sitting on sets. You have hours when they're setting up the lighting and stuff, and that's when I used to do it. Used to go with me. But what I also know is that our Lord has used that on 3 occasions to bring someone to himself. And it was a ridiculous thing. I got a letter back from a guy, and he just said, I asked you for a photograph, and you very kindly sent it back. And he worked as an extra on the shows. And he said, "You've always got time. You always come and talk to the extras and all that sort of stuff, and ask how we are and all that sort of thing." And he said, "But at the end of your letter, you just said, 'God bless you.' Why?" And I just wrote back, and he was brought to Jesus, by that. But we shouldn't be surprised. But we are. But we shouldn't be surprised. You know, for where
and that's living our life, isn't it? It's not being super spiritual. It's not being, I've got to preach to them. It's living our life and taking those opportunities where we are when we can.
Yeah. I think as certainly in Covenanters, which I was, and then as a youth leader in the church, I think that really used to hit home to me as Harlow started to grow and I'd ran the football team. To get that past the elders was enormous at the time. But I just felt, well, they're not going to come to church, and necessarily why should they? But, we go out there, we play, and I joined the local league, so we were up against ordinary teams. But it was fantastic, and what I would do is I would use the church bus and we'd go down to Southend in Essex if we won that year, and we'd take the lads down, go on the scale electrics track and all that sort of thing. But that's the kind of person that I am. I used to get up and sort of lay preach and things, but it really, for me, it's sort of being out there. When I'm on the radio and Premier Radio and that sort of stuff, one of the things I continually say to us in church, if the drunk came in, if the pregnant teenager come in, are we ready? Because we should be. Yeah. That's where that's where my Christianity is.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back. I mean, we were talking about this church. We got sidetracked. As I know, we're going to do it all the time. Don't worry about it. But 10 years of age, you saw this practical Christianity. When did your life change and you really come to know Jesus? How did that happen?
I thought I was a committed Christian until 1966, 14, and went to the Billy Graham crusade. And the only way I describe it, and it really upsets Cherry, my missus, because she says she wants that. And I was like, but you don't need to. You're such a great Christian. You don't need that. I needed the Paul on the road to Damascus burning bush. I thought I didn't, but I did. And I was sat in those seats along with many, many others. And just when he preached, Billy Graham preached those words, I want you to get up out of you. The only way I can describe it was there was a tunnel and I had no choice. I was just down and I found myself at Earl's Court on that floor with many, many hundreds of others. And you get a mentor, that's assigned to you. That's but I actually thought I was a committed Christian up until that point. And from then on, that glow that only we can talk about has been there. And it was, but I think probably for me, because of being in the church for so long, then rebelling against, I suppose, the ritual was what there were preachers that used to, Oakwood Chapel it's called in Harlow, there was preachers that used to come and I was so, because at the end, I would really get them up against the wall almost and sort of say, yeah, that's great, but it doesn't work out there. It's great for us all on, Wednesday's Bible study, I love it because it's for us. And that's for us to renew our batteries, if you like, and really get into Scripture and know our foundations. But out there, it's a different thing. And I think we just have to be, in my head, just ready for those that want us and need us. Because I don't preach to people, but people will say, what have you got? What makes you the way you are? And I think within my industry, it's pretty well known. And certainly when I out practically talking about my life, it comes out. It comes through the book the whole time. You can't help it because it's such a vital part.
Well, it is, isn't it? And that's what I'm hearing from you. I mean, you receive Christ. Christ becomes part of your life. You're filled with His Spirit. He is going to come out because you go into that situation, but it's not just you, is it? No. It's the Lord in you.
I do find myself, when I'm doing after dinners and that sort of stuff, asking for forgiveness again. Yes. Because I do go down these strange, obscure routes. But I can't have this. It's that thing that I said to you about always going against the trend. And that feeling of being in the world but not of it, you can't be in what we do without being so into the world. But what you then need is such a firm base behind you where you've got really good Christian mates praying for you when you're in those situations. And it is tough. And when I gave my life to Jesus, I knew what I wanted to do. See, from 8, I used to go to Saturday morning cinema for sixpence, and I'll leave you to explain to everybody what that was. And I was part of that. And I loved films, and I still loved the movies. Yes. John Wayne and Humphrey Bogart, butcher than butch guys, I loved. And if you ever watch the Bill, you will see every now and again, after he'd done a real good job, I'd actually do the John Wayne walk back to Sierra One and get in the car and, and drive off. But that was my, and I knew from an early what I wanted to do. So I was in folk groups for the church, folk groups, rock groups, performing whenever I could, school plays, obviously, and all that sort of thing. But when I said I wanted to become a professional actor, and my dad had sent me in to do something sensible. At school, I was only good at sport. I used to say I was only ever good at two things, going there and coming home. But I was only good at sport and English. I was absolute rubbish at everything else. And I loved English because obviously of the films and of scripts and of words and meaning of words and all that sort of thing. And Dad just said, you've got to do something sensible. So the only thing I'd been in is St John Ambulance since I was 9 with my mum and my dad. And so I went and worked in the health service when I was 16 and a half. Instead of going to university, everybody thought I wouldn't study English and become a teacher. But I didn't want to do the health service. I knew all about bones and all that. And so I was singing in this corridor. I'm a very noisy person. Sherry will tell you, at 5 in the morning, I'm either awake or asleep. There's no middle ground. And I do find myself singing in the shower. Shut.
Do you want to apologise now?
Shut up. No, I have done 1,000 times to her, honestly. And I was singing in the show, and this guy came up and said, I want you to come and sing my amateur operatic group. And I don't really do that sort of thing, you know. And he said, but I do. And if you do, I'll train you. In what? In orthopaedics, as an orthopaedic technician. And his name was John Porrier, and he was the orthopaedic surgeon. And that's how I went into orthopaedics, sent to Royal National Orthopaedic in Stanmore. But my point of view on that was, it was all very easy for me to learn because I didn't care that much about it. I knew where I was heading for. My poor patients were put through all sorts of things, jokes and songs and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But I realised quite early on, Doug, that if you're reducing a fracture or you're redoing the plaster and it's a scaphoid and you've got percentage turns to put on the bones and things, that if you tell them something silly or you're just holding them in conversation, I've done it before they've realised it. And it hurts. There is no point in telling an 8 or 9-year-old this isn't going to hurt. It is. But if you fill them with a little bit, and I was the first to bring in a radio into the plaster room, just so they could listen to Capital, while I was doing all these horrible things to them. But throughout all of my time there, and I only did 4.5 years in the health service, it was leading up to when I'd come, and in 1974 I went off to become a Redcoat. And,
tell us about. I mean, this is this is infamous, isn't it? The Redcoats. Everybody seemed to have started as a Redcoat. Did you sense that was the beginning for you? Is that why you went there?
I really think that we don't give God enough credit. And I used to buy the Stage newspaper, and in there it just said, why not become, do you sing, dance, act, and that sort of, ring this number. And I rang the number, and they go, well, come and see us. And I went to see them, and they put me into 3 camps, of which I had the choice of going to. You go and view these camps in March. It's freezing.
Listen, we used to do Spring Harvest up there at that time. I know what it's like.
Well, this is Canberra Sands in Kent was the place that I chose, right, because it was a fantastic family-run business. Madison's was the company, and got 3,000 on site. All day long, I was doing my love, which was I was in charge of sport and all that sort of things, all the competitions. And then at night, you had to have 3 acts over the 3 nights, but they would then bring in people like you've met, the Cannon and Balls and the Little and Larges and all that to do the cabaret. And on Monday nights was my job to run the disco and things. It was fantastic training. And again, on Sundays, I nipped to the local church in between the roles, and you don't realise people are watching you do that. But I have to say that when I went off and to become an actor, which was my ultimate goal, I got virtually excommunicated. The elders just felt it was wrong, and so wrong. Because it was the wrong way you would be... Well, after my job as a Redcoat, I then did, on the Thursday, which was my day off, I went up to London, did 1 audition and got with the Bel Canto Singers, which was the Del Fontaine Grade organisation. So I used to go out and sing songs with 18 girl dancers. And that is why I think but my question to them, Doug, was always, but you've known me since I was 9. Yeah. So why do you think, that I'm going to be any different? And I really felt that, most actors will tell you that, I can't do anything else. I'm absolutely useless at everything. Cherry, I tell you, she said, I want these shelves. Oh, no, forget it. You're putting a screw in a wall is going to be a major adventure. If I'm hoovering or dusting, I'm playing somebody. I'm either a forensics expert or I'm doing something. I mean, I really have that strange brain that you need. If you know, one of the things I say to producers is, why do you expect me to be sensible now, when you know I'm a kid? That's the biggest requisite of being an actor, is that childlike quality to become other people. But that really, really hurt me. And I've spoken to obviously to them individually since, and it was just that feeling of going into that world and becoming much more part of that world. Whereas I really did think it was a calling, and certainly to get a job in '84, as I did as Tony Stamp, having done my 10 years in repertory theatre and musicals and out the West End and all that sort of stuff, I've been hugely blessed. For 22 years I didn't have an agent, because you just went from job to job. And as I was touring with John Hanson, I'm going to bring out some names. So I was touring with John Hanson and those guys in chorus, and then covering him and others, you know, in major roles. As we go around the country, I would say to the theatre managers that if you've got a season coming up and you think I'll be good for that, particularly comedies, would you ring me? And bless them, they did. And so, you know, that's the governor, and we shouldn't be surprised that happens to us.
Did you ever find, though, a real testing of your faith? I mean, I'm very interested to hear you felt it was a calling, and I think that's great. And I think that's something we really want to establish, because some people think, I'll just go and do this. And you probably don't have the same protection of the Lord as if he calls you into it. He says, I'll provide for you. Yep. Have you ever really been tempted to leave the Lord behind as you've gone through this?
What has been fascinating has been in roles, for instance, Wait Until Dark, which was only part of a season for me of 5 plays. I was playing the husband who has to leave a lighted cigarette, if you're going to do as the script says, burning in an ashtray. Well, I look such an idiot lighting this cigarette, I mean, because I've never smoked. And that in the end, they had me coming out of the darkroom, he's a photographer, with a lighted cigar, which he doesn't smoke, it's just in his fingers, and he leaves in the ashtray, because his wife is blind. So he creates a fire in the ashtray, which gets the villain into the flat. So it's quite an important part of the plot. So I've always found things like that. On the bill, you know, I've never sworn on the bill. My view as an actor is, you don't need to. Right. Because I think there's certain times, I mean, when I've been in the bill, and when Martella got shot, for instance, and then the double shotgun comes up into your face, it doesn't spring to mind as a human being to go, would you put that down, please? You know, it really doesn't. So you
and because
will
you're
be
right
tested,
into the role, aren't you? As
you
well.
will
I mean,
be tested there.
Yes.
But my view has always been, and most producers and directors would go with that, is why alienate? Yes. You know, we're in people's front rooms. They've allowed us into their homes. So why alienate? And the fact is with Stamp, and I really did try to pioneer it, I'll do it on that camera in a sec, I really did try to pioneer is that bring the audience in, and it's in a drama, it's a very difficult thing to do. But as Stamp, you're going to go off and look at old tapes, I know, but I would do this, I'll be talking to you, and just as my eyes would go through the camera, just for the audience, I would go, and you're really in drama not allowed to do that. But with Tony Stamp, because his face told you, and the letters I used to get from people going, I knew what you were thinking.
Yes.
And that to me is an absolute expression. When you're in, if I was playing a war character, you know, a soldier, modern day soldier, you're going to be tested as a Christian, because I know what the script is going to be. What you then have to do, Doug, is spend hours in prayer. I've done Jesus Christ Superstar twice on stage. Really? Once as Pilate and once as Caiaphas. And that can be quite, because it's a piece of entertainment. But my goodness, does it move people?
Yes.
People that had no intention of being moved, because it tells us. And Pilate was a fascinating character, because he's led by his wife. You know, he did everything because he was trying to please his wife. And what I love about those characters is going in and finding them, researching it, finding out about that. I did find in my early life, if I'd stayed on at school and gone to drama school, as most should have done, as I'm going around the country, and Neil Simon's a great love of mine, I love comedies, but whereas I would have done all that research in drama school, I had to do it for myself and find a way that worked for me. And the same with Tony.
Because
Stamp.
I mean, and I mean, you were telling me earlier on about the front cover of this book.
I'm the only
the police
ever to be allowed to actually wear Metropolitan Police uniform. on a cop, because obviously I'm not a copper. Many people think that I am. I have to say, you know, even in the wings when we were just finishing Panto, some of the girl dancers were saying, well, if we have a party tonight, how much can I drink? I don't know. Don't ask me. Yeah. And this is an absolute true story. I'm driving through Brixton and I've got a black Vectra. So it couldn't be further away from looking like a police car. And I'm just at traffic lights on the inside and this car comes up. It's got booming music coming from it. And it's got 3 black lads in there. And I just sort of looked at them and gave them a little smile. And the passenger looked at me and he said something to the driver. And the driver had to look across and the guy in the back, and they put their seatbelts on. It was just such a surreal moment. But they obviously, you know, the face, like you were saying in that introduction, the face is, you know, they've grown up with you, haven't they?
They do. But you did all your own stunts.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what are you? You're a singer. You're you're an actor. You're a stunt.
Yeah.
I mean, it's your life, isn't it? I mean, that whole thing.
The only thing that you really have to say is that to do my own stunts, I'd always been around motor cars. I race cars. I have a racing licence. I love motor cars. And when they asked me to play Tony Stamp, I knew nothing about an area car driver. I spoke to Wilf Knight, who at the time was our police advisor, and from then I've been to Hendon 8-9 times to learn how to do it as the police do it. I go to actually do their courses. And if you're going to do your own stunts, then you really, really have to train and train and train. And I was very fortunate in that the stunt arrangers would show me the stunt, tell me what they wanted me to do. Are you comfortable doing it? Are you happy doing that? And then we'd go and we'd do it. But it's a huge responsibility if you're going to do that. I mean, always actors have to know the fight sequences. And that really got me into the build, you know, doing broadsword fighting and all that sort of thing. And being, again, as I said, I like the physicality of theatre. And one of the things that you miss a little bit working in television is the fun you can have. Just coming out of Panto and playing the baddie, it's finding how he's going to stand, how you're going to play him. And one of the things, after about 4 days, I walk out and do my opening gambit, and all the flashes have gone off, and the dear fairy just had done her bit to begin with. And then I came on, and the number of kids that had to be taken out was really quite scary. But, you know, my view of that, again, though, is that's children's introduction to theatre.
Yes.
And if you get it right. And the same thing with that, the research to play Tony Stamp was massive. And I learnt very early on that if I'm going to play him to any kind of credibility, I needed to go out with the guys. And so from day one, I was always on straight shifts with the guys. So if you've got the sus laws, the stop and search laws, you know, they changed. Every time a government came in, they changed their minds about it. And, of course, what I needed to know was not what the writers needed to know, which they would go to their hierarchy, and the hierarchy would tell them the book, this is what the law is. What I needed to know is, OK, what works on the street? What bits work when you're actually getting out of the car and talking to someone? And the only way you can do that is to sit with the guys and be honest. And one of the things that I think they liked about Stamp was in the canteen, you know, he's always, yeah, but they changed the rules, didn't they? You know, and all that sort of thing, which is what the banter that I would have heard, you know, the night before. And it's terrible. And they were wonderfully gracious to me to allow me to go out with them, because you honestly see them with their trousers down. I mean, we arrive in reality, and I have stopped fights because we've gone into a big punch-up, and they go, hey, it's Tony off the bill. And I have to say I've started fights because I'm Tony off the bill, and they think there's a camera coming just behind me. Yeah. So it's extraordinary. But one of the things, again, that ties in with my faith and why I'm there is to be able to then be a bit of a spokesman, because I'm able to say, have you, to politicians and others, been on the 3rd floor, 4th floor, 9th floor, 11th floor of a block of flats at 3 in the morning, and the door's open to a little 4-year-old who doesn't bat an eyelid, that his mum and dad, you know, his dad is battering, still got the mother by the throat virtually. And you have to experience that in order to be able to say, well, what is that really like? What's life really like? And alas, Matthew, my son, he trained as a counsellor with Childline. And he had 3 suicides, you know, in his sort of 4 years with them. It's tough. And on the phones, it's very, very tough. Yeah. But the reality is that you're able to say, you know, that there is something beyond that. That works for me. I'm not saying it's going to work for you, but give it a go. And the great thing, I think, is just the spirit, just the power that we very often don't see, because he does the job.
Amen.
You know, we're getting in the way very often. And certainly I find myself, when Stevie Legg and I go out with Lighthouse and we do these alpha groups, you know, I very often find myself really straining to stop, it's not like that at all. You know, and you really sit back, you know, and
do you feel as Christians, you know, so often we're so unreal? In other words, we go in and yes, we take our time in our church. And as we've already said, we need the Bible study, we need the praise, we need our fellowship together. So there's nothing wrong in that. But we also need to be able to walk into this world and communicate into this world on their level.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think what's so interesting about something like the bill, it is fiction in one way, and yet it was bringing some reality to people as well. And they could look at that and could say, this is life. Do you think as Christians we need to get prepared for life maybe more than we do?
I think what is interesting, the dichotomy on that, is that the bill never won awards. And it never won awards because nobody knew where we slotted. We were a drama documentary, and nobody really, honestly, and I think probably the hierarchy as well of TV, never understood how you could go out and make this. I mean, neither did we, in 5 days and that sort of thing. And I think our Christianity is the same. We shouldn't be surprised. We should just allow ourselves to go out there and do it. But I think you do need a solid prayer foundation beneath you. And one of the things, if I might just say about my life as an actor, there has to be Christian producers, directors, cameramen, actors, agents. I don't meet many, but there has to be. Now, I've been doing this for 40 years, but there has to be. How fantastic, before you do a drama series, to have a prayer before you go and do it. We're out there. I mean, I've just made a lovely film, a short film called Derelict for the Bible Society. A dear old, gotten his name straight away as soon as I need it, Walton at the Bible Society. He does this wonderful competition every year, and Simeon won it. He wrote this piece, and it's based on the book of Philemon, and it's fantastic. And we went out, we shot it in 3 days, which is impossible, but it's out there. It's on my Facebook and others. You want to have a look at it? Derelict, I can put it up. Have a look. It's a fantastic piece of work, and it was wonderful. It's just Christians, just all together, but making a fantastic product. Now, you see, I would go against saying that we've got to go out and make something that's biblical. You don't necessarily have to do that, but like the pantomime, we all got on so well, that rolls over. The audience can see that. I was told that today when I was putting some checks in Barclays Bank by a lady that saw it. She said, you could see you guys are enjoying it.
Yes.
And that's what all we need to do is get together as Christians, make a really good drama series, and the governor will do the rest. But we have to get out there and we have to do it. You know, we're scraping around. Luke Walton, his name is. Sorry, Luke. We're scraping around for cash to make these. You know, Africa United, great film made by Christians. You know, and if you'd heard the story of how that came about, it's wonderful. But we shouldn't be surprised. And that, for me, and that practicality of playing Tony Stamp for 25 years, I think was totally down to God and down to the way he used me there. And it's very tough sometimes to, in the world now that I live in now, where they're all going, oh, you just Tony Stamp for 25 years, you know, the audience aren't going to accept him. And they think you're going to, I just play the character. That's right. You know, that's my job. You tell me who you want me to be and I'll be him. And I think that's what we need to do as Christians, is just trust. I think we're almost surrounded by too much technicality now, and we used to sit down sometimes at script readings and you know, they've got a problem with the script and something, and well, let's go out and shoot it. We know the foundations of what you want. Let's just see what comes into our head, and it works. And I think as well, you know, as practical Christians, let's get out there and make a great product, and it will go out prime time, just good, solid drama, without the nonsense that we have to have so very often with someone. You see, most producers, directors have got this burning film, this topic that they want to. Well, if we can transfer the energy like we did for Simeon onto the screen, it's fantastic. And it is Derek. I'm very proud of Derek. It's only a 50-minute film, but yeah.
It doesn't have to, as you say, have scripture quoted every 2 or 3 minutes and every 5 minutes. But it's showing the moral value. It's showing that life has value, and maybe we've come to the place so often today. Well, you've mentioned Childline, and you've mentioned the tragedy of so many children in the circumstances that they live. And you look on that and say, how can parents do that? And we can show that life itself has a value, and we need to seek to find that value in life.
And I think to be really open, to let the Spirit lead us. As you know, I used to work with Rob Frost a lot, bless him, on Premier Radio, and he used to bring me in on his panels. And I can't say that I upset a lot of people, but what I tended to do, and it wasn't intentional, Doug, it really wasn't, but just say, it's not like that. It's a bit like when Steve, he does Sorted magazine, which is a great men's magazine. And I went just before Christmas, and we did this survey about Christians, and so many Christians didn't feel comfortable talking to their vicar. We said, well, if we aren't, anybody outside our exclusive little club hasn't got a chance, and that sort of thing is, well, who do you talk to? A bit like the elders, who were. If you're not in the world that we're in, it is tough. My industry is tough. I play people, and my job is to move you. My job in Panto was to make you hate me. It might have been in a nice way, but that was my job. I was flesh creep. It's in the name, But I think in doing the job to the best of my ability, but founded in my Christianity, that's the job. That is the job, And when you see some films, that'd been a great film without the swearing. Yes. It just would have been a good bit without the swearing. I'm not saying I don't swear as me, but what I'm saying is it necessary as that character? Now, sometimes it is. And when I do Alpha and we talk to Christians and I go out and do these after dinners with them, I'm very on it. If you ask me, I will tell you. And it will upset people. And I do get battered I do get battered afterwards.
Yes.
By it, But I think you have to have an honesty. Now, one of the things that I was doing a men's script, it's absolutely true, I was doing a men's chat, and suddenly the fact that every night I do sort of a bit of yoga and a bit of self-hypnosis. I got into hypnosis because I have really bad tinnitus. And I've had an ear op and my ear's been restored. You have to buy the book to really find out about it. But
don't forget to buy it.
But I was going deaf and trying to work as an actor, and I learnt to lip read. But what really got me through that is the tinnitus is always in your head, always. And I found this way of every night, 20 minutes, just shutting the system down, learning how to shut the system down. And I just said that at one of these all sort of men Christian weekends. And wow, did I really get battered by a couple of guys, and how unreligious it was, and into the occult and all that sort of stuff. And you need that. I don't argue, and I went back to the book and back to prayer about that. But my goodness me, you can't shut that down.
And it's the way, I think, again, I'm very interested in what you said there, because I think we've all been in situations like that. But it is that we are willing to take that criticism and check it out.
Yeah.
Okay, if we just ignore it, that's wrong. If you just, that's right. But it is checking that out, which is so vital, isn't it?
See, the practicality with leaving Oakwood and going into the big world, what was fascinating, I've still got the only Bible I've ever had, what was fascinating was from Beryl Reid, and not the Beryl, but girl that was at the church with me. Yeah. Shows you how old it is, because look at that. And I didn't know I didn't know that was in there.
Oh, we couldn't get a close-up of that. You wouldn't believe it. You would not believe it, guys.
The reason that's in here is because she knew I was going off to fulfil my dream to become an actor. And it was just lovely. It's a 2-page, wonderful scriptural readings for me to back up. And she was just, very quiet, very unassuming, would never join any committees or clubs or anything like that. But what a Christian, and that has been with me ever since, from Mrs. Reid, and it's fantastic. fantastic. And it just, don't think of me as a nuisance. But as we were talking last night, when I went home, these thoughts came to me. And as I said, I will pass them on to you now. As I said, that's from the governor.
I mean, it's interesting. You're talking about taking your Bible with you. I mean, when you're doing pantomime, and I know we're saying you would sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, and it really is hard work. I mean, I've seen that. And, people that go and watch it thoroughly enjoy it, but they don't realise how much hard work you're putting into it. How do you stay close to the Lord in that time? How do you find? Do you think, I must go and have my quiet time, or is it no? I'm just going to live with the Lord through that day. I
talk to Jesus all the time. Driving the car all the time. I'm in prayer most of the time. And all actors have a little ritual. And I call upon people that I work with in my career that I loved and admired and was very fortunate to experience and have passed on. And particularly my dad, he was a great influence over me, because when I started out singing and doing the old-time musicals, his knowledge of music was fantastic. And he would bring out songs that I would never have found, that are still blaze away, and stuff that I still do if I go and do old-time musical, and beautiful, beautiful old songs about mums and all that sort of thing that you just wouldn't find out. And they're lovely. Love's Old Sweet Song and stuff like that. They're absolutely lovely songs, and I still use them to this day. But you are in battle, and I stood in the wings at the lovely Stag Theatre in Sevenoaks, and still prayed, Lord, use me. I'm going to go out there, do this job, but use me. See, to me, I don't have sort of slots in my life. I never have. So that's why that's with me, and it's got a concordance with it and all that sort of stuff. Because my life as a Christian is the same as my life as an actor. Suddenly, what does that mean? And because of the concordance at the bottom, I can flip it through and cross-reference it and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And it's lovely, and it really has been with me for a very, 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 very long time. It's even got the Ash Tree Field address in it. But it's just something. 1968.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
And I just, for me, I've been so lucky.
Yes.
There's very, very few actors that can tell you what I've told you. And I wrote the book. It's all me. It was put together by Nuala Giblin in book form, who knew me really well from the days of the Bill as a publicist. But it's me, and people will say, you've interviewed me, how my brain flies around. And the book's the same. I start something, I go off, and they're like, but everyone that knows me is just that you can see that you've written this, because.
And, I mean, one of the things you deal with here, of course, is the end of the bill. And my feeling, talking to you, and that is that you would have been quite happy still to be doing the bill to this day. I mean, it really wasn't something you were that happy with to end it, was it really?
Well, I think every actor knows, for instance, for your listeners, my contracts were always 6 monthly. So I might have done a 3-year deal with them, but there will be always 6 monthly clauses. And everyone that works on television has that. That's so if you're a naughty boy or a naughty girl, they've got a get-out clause. Or if, as in the case of the bill, what really happened was we had this meeting and we were going to go into HD and all that sort of thing. And our immediate bosses said, we want the bill to go young and sexy. So I thought, well, I'm in trouble on 2 counts. And so, and then what really happened was they got absolutely incensed about the new bill. They wanted no reference to the old bill at all, and I got caught up in that wave. And as you know of me, I can't keep the mouth shut, unfortunately. And it was something that I loved and I knew about. And the thing, Doug, that you would get, that your producers wouldn't get, is you get stopped in the street and people tell you what they think of you and the show. And so I used to try and pass that on to the management, and they always thought you're either trying to score brownie points or something like that. Because what I was saying to them was the uniqueness of the bill is the uniform. And the reason most uniform shows don't work is they aren't so beautifully written as the bill was. And then the actors allowed to do their job, which is Jess Stewart be Hollis, Graham Cole be Stamp. You're allowed to just go out there, and very often the directors would just say to you, just do what Stamp would do. Just, you know him, I don't know him. And to me, the bill was always telling the story. The most important people on that set were the guest artists. It's their story. The audience know me. We're there to service them. And it's a very unique thing about programmes in that sense, in that we were the regular cast, but we weren't the stars. The star was the show and the guest artists and those stories that rolled in, and beautiful writing. And I just felt, what you're doing is a huge disservice to your audience. The audience should be the ones who decide. You have award ceremonies, and the best award ceremonies are the ones that the people decide, because you're all sitting there going, what? But that's my industry. That's what it's about. When people come into theatre, which is my world, they decide whether they like you or not. Pantomime is about getting it right, and hopefully then children's introduction to theatre. They had a good time. Oh, let's go back and let's see it again. It's not about you promoting your act or promoting you or whatever. My job is to be flesh creep from the minute it starts until, as Laura used to get upset when she was little, my daughter. But as in Seven Oaks, I'm taking my bow and they're still booing.
You've won.
You've done the job.
You've done a good job.
Yeah, and it was tough for me, because I've never wanted to be a policeman, and I really don't. But I work with the Widows and Orphans Fund. I do all sorts of things outside with the police, because it's a tough job. And my thank you to them was to get involved in their charities. And so it was very tough, because I knew my input of, it's not like that. Yeah. Used to annoy a lot of people, but the importance is, that you need to find a level in television of reality, and then into that strange world. The gulf that you sometimes create with your audience. We as actors, well, if it bothers us, there's a good chance it's going to bother the audience. And what I used to say to them, and if that's true, you're going to lose 2.5 minutes of your dialogue, because they're going to be discussing it. They're not going to wait. Did he really say that? And the whole point of that is, And again, you beautifully ask, and I skipped around it as usual. Your job of an actor is to move people. That's your job. It's to make people think. It's to really get inside characters, and that's what I've loved, and what I would love to do more of. The downside is, having been with Stamp for 25 years, I'm really finding it tough getting work, because the TV bosses are all going, the BBC and places like that, everyone's going to know he's Tony Stamp. And I say, well, have a look at Derelict, because I'm not Tony. And I've got a lovely little text, which I've kept on my phone, from Laura, because she texted me and she said, Dad, I've now seen you play 3 people since you've left the bill, and none of them are Tony Stamp. And that's a lovely thing to get from your daughter. But I think, like everything, it moves on, and I've been there 20 years. And the thing you've got to remember is that repertory theatre, that going out there and playing 5 characters in repertory with each other. When you go and do the Agatha Christie's and the Durbridges, I did on tour 5 different plays, and it's sometimes 6 weeks before you've done that play again. That you're learning your craft, you're doing your job. There's this strange celebrity. Now, I am classed as one of those, but I honestly don't know what that is. I really don't know what that is, because you aren't. I'm paid to do a job that I've loved. And there are so many. I think when people come into the theatre, my view of that is, and you can honestly see it in their faces, the husband's there and he didn't want to be there. Not necessarily in panto, but in plays as well, and in musicals in particular. And you can actually see over a 2.5 hour period of getting into them and bringing them out of that. And that's the actor's job, and that's the theatre's job, is for you to forget what's going on. Now, I've been offered, a job, and I don't know whether to take it or not, and I'm just praying about it. Laura has said to me, this is the 2nd time it's come up, Dad. Perhaps God's telling you to go and do it. But if I do, it's very controversial. And I won't say what it is. No. But But
when it happens, we heard it first here on Revelation
Absolutely.
TV.
But that is the difficulty of having a faith.
But it's also, what I'm very interesting in what you've said there is, you obviously want work, but you're still not just going to jump at the first thing. You're still going to ensure that God is in it for you.
There's three Christian actors on the cast of the bill at the time, when someone in a suit, as I always describe them, realised that they could call us on a Sunday and it didn't cost them anything. Now, we used to work on Sundays, but very rarely, only if we were having to shut streets off for major stunts or getting into a bank or a school or something like that. And we actually went to the management and we said, look, if we were Muslims or if we were, you would have to give us prayer time, which they do. and are very open about it. Said, you know, for some of us, all we're asking is, if we're called on a Sunday, could you just look at the schedules to make sure we can either go to Sunday morning or evensong or somewhere, you know, in between? And they just, no, we don't have to. And it was as simple as that. And you actually, wow. Well, you'll get that. Now, on the pantomime, we work Sundays. Now, there's going to be a lot of fundamental Christians that will say to you, that is so wrong. Well, if I didn't work Sundays, I didn't do that contract, I don't do that job. That's the dichotomy, I suppose, is what you're asking me, of being working in the industry that I work in. The unsocial hours that we do and everything else. One of the saddest things I think about being an actor is I drag my family with me through it. And it's very tough for the family. Cherry and I, since the invention of cameras on mobile phones, Cherry and I never have a quiet meal together. It's non-existent. There is always somebody taking your picture. And one of the things, and in all fairness to her, is, you know, she says, you're the actor. You're the one who's chosen to do that. Well, let me tell you that as well. Yeah, great story. In 1974, as a Redcoat, that's where we met. She was 16 and I was 20, just come up to 21. And that's where we met. Now, if that's not God doing his job.
And again, you know, talking about marriage, I mean, so many in the acting profession, I mean, marriages break up for the very reason that you've said, because of the pressure. But God's held you together. You mentioned earlier
we have good, interesting moments, I would say.
I don't know any marriage that hasn't. Yeah. But God has been with you through that and enables you to move through that as well.
And it's a very selfish job, because if I get a role, and for instance, like, you know, obviously for the bill, you never stop learning. Well, I really tried that my family didn't see me constantly with my nose in a script. So the pages would be out and they'd be seconded all over the place, you know, and I'd open the drawer and do and then go back and be a dad and a husband for a little bit more. But it is very difficult. But also, and one of the things I think that the elders were really worried about, if you're doing your job properly, every character you play costs you. A little chunk of you will go. And it's very tough. Even when you're playing Flesh Creep and you're being the baddie, the guys will tell you, behind the curtain, opening up of the second half, I sing a song, a baddie song. And really, in the whole of the second half of the pantomime, I don't leave the stage. And they just used to know that for the last 2 minutes, I muck around, you know, during sort of the interval that you're all having. I'll muck around, then they know there come a point when I stop. Because, and talking to Ems, who was the head girl, she's going into the zone, right? Saying, yeah, got to think bad. And that is true, you know, and that costs you. And even though it was panto, it costs you because your head's got to be with that character, you know. And there were times when you do the script and you look out, we had this fantastic giant that would come on, 12 feet tall, fantastic giant, beautifully lit by Jamie, our producer. And I'd done this big build-up with the princess and all that, and I'm bowing and make myself look as small as I can. And he came on, and I would sneak a look at the audience, and it was just, this is why I do what I do. Yeah, it was just magical, beautiful moment.
Because it is, because there is, you know, people can say, well, entertainment is getting you out of reality, but sometimes you can go to a show like that, you especially a pantomime, you can laugh, you can cry, you can go through the emotions, but you can actually, it can lift you, it can make you different, it can do something in your life.
What I love about pantomime is you see sometimes 5 generations, and that's what I loved. And you get letters, but I'm still working my way through the letters, I have to say. And you did, you know, you got a family of 15 have come through and have loved it. Well, you know, on that, you always take me somewhere else. You know, we were doing Abigail's Party in the Round down in Swansea, and a whole row got up and left. And I went, wow, we didn't think we were that bad. And I was playing Tony, his wonderful monosyllabic character, wonderful character to play. And we got a letter a couple of weeks later, and it was a family, and their dad had died at a family party. And that bit about have a look at what you're going to see, because we actually reenacted it for them all over again. And they'd come to theatre to be taken out of that. Yes. And lo and behold, you know, in Abigail's Party, Lawrence has a heart attack and dies. And they'd come to the theatre as a family to sort of unite and get together, and we reenacted it again for them. But it's one of the things that, you know, working in the health service put me in good stead for. It's a terrible story, so I apologise before I tell it. But I did Anne of Green Gables. I loved musicals. And the guy who played Matthew Cuthbert had a heart attack, and I was rung up that night and said, look, tomorrow matinee, will you go on as Matthew? Maybe cover him for the rest of the run. So that night, book comes up, and I did, and Matthew Cuthbert dies. And tell Marilla to forget the silver ladderly is his last line. And I got a letter from a lady who said, I've seen many, many actors die in the sense of the character. You did it so beautifully. I really, really believed it. And you then realise, of course, in casualty, when I work in orthopaedics, you can only do that if someone breaks something. So I became part of the cardiac team because I'm a big old lump. And so very often in casualty, you know, you had a life under your hands. And I'd obviously seen so many people die that when I then came to act it, you know, I sort of seen it so many times. And I also got so when late night, one of your rivals, LBC, did you know anyone before they were famous? And this guy rang in and said, yeah, this bloke that's playing Tony Stample, of course Smith is my real name, Graham Coleman Smith is my real name.
Yeah.
That bloke, I'm sure he's Graham Smith. When I came off my bike and broke my leg, I'm sure it was him. I've been waiting for the suing letter to come. I now walk with a limp. Or something, you know. But it's amazing, you just don't know who you touch when you're in those. And you know, and I seriously do look at faces. I love psychology and people's attitudes and the way they sit and all that sort of thing. I've been studying you know, the way you. I love that part. You know, as a copper, that's one of the big things. You know, you fly through the streets, everything on, the blues and the sirens going, everything on. You get out, you run into the situation. It's the last 6 foot is when you have to assess everything.
What's going on?
Who's the noisy one? Who's the dangerous one? Who's you know? And it's amazing, and you learn that body psychology, and you do it. You know, I'm looking out all the time. You know, when people are in the theatre, that's my domain. You're looking at me, or I'm looking at you, and you really do see people change through that 2.5 hours, and it's a one. Taking 1,200 people through an emotion with you is extraordinary.
You know, Graham, our time's gone. I could sit and talk with you all day, I promise you. I've been thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm sure our viewers have as well. Thank you so much. Maybe we'll get you back one day to sing for us. That would be even great.
Thank you.
Bless you. Thank you so much for being with us. And we do go and buy the book. Go and see whatever comes next for Graham. And just continue to pray and really support him in his Christian faith. Bless you. See you again soon. Bye for now.